She never expected her first taste of luxury to come with the acrid scent of gunpowder hanging in the air. The opulence of the ballroom was shadowed by the sounds of muffled whispers and eyes that cut like daggers through the dim light. Victoria Russo had entered what she believed was the tastefully grand, albeit intimidating, wedding venue of her old college friend, Nicole. Nicole's family name promised an unquestionable kind of wealth, a wealth that Victoria had never been privy to, but always tangentially aware of. She fiddled with the soft fabric of her modest dress, feeling the whispers of velvet as it brushed her legs, a luxury she'd only allowed herself for the sake of blending into Nicole's world. The grandeur of the Italian chandeliers, refracted upon the polished marble floors, clashed thunderously against Victoria's internal whirlwind of doubt and insecurity. From afar, she had been the underdog in her own narrative, the girl lost in scholarship programs and part-time jobs, invisible until necessary. Yet, the moment she stepped across the threshold, signaled by the snap of the heavy doors closing behind her, she sensed that the carefree event she was prepared for had warped into something sinister. Her heels clicked against the cold marble, each step more uncertain than the last, an unspoken beat synchronizing with her quickening pulse. Orbited by an abyss of unfamiliar socialites, Victoria's heart drummed a rhythm of betrayal and loneliness. It was clear that despite her elegant attire, the crowd dismissed her presence. She was mere background noise to their high-stakes interactions. Then came the crisis, an intuitive nudge followed by an ill-fated turn. A firm hand on her shoulder, a whisper drenched in honeyed venom. "So you finally decided to join us, Senora. The bride has been waiting." The hand belonged to a man with eyes colder than the Siberian dawn, piercing and authoritative. Even without the tailored suit, he would have been intimidating. His presence a siege upon the merriment around them. Victoria's tongue felt heavy, her speech trapped in a mire of confusion. "Bride? There must be a mistake. My friend Nicole." His chuckle was laced with knowing. "No mistakes, Senora Aurora. You are at the right place for the wrong reasons." The world around her began to tilt as realization stained her thoughts. She had intruded upon a familial conclave, the elite underworld of Mafia society dressed in wedding finery. As the evening wore on, her attempts to clarify her identity were met with growing skepticism and thinly veiled hostility. Pressure mounted like the weight of earth above a suffocated root. She could feel eyes puncturing her facade, seeking truth she could not provide. Under the scrutiny of the congregation, each question, posed bluntly, was a nail driven through her resolve, yet she held fragile dignity like a glass sculpture. The crescendo of tension reached a zenith when a voice cut through the drama, the voice of the presumed groom, a young man whose presence demanded an instinctive silence. "Leave her be, Carlo," he commanded, a subtle dominance threaded through his voice. His eyes met hers, a moment of piercing understanding. With a shift in the atmosphere, he extended an open hand, a silent truce offered on the edge of chaos. "There are secrets here more potent than the vows exchanged. You are a part of it now." As if trapped in a faded photograph, her world became still, until the music resumed, its harmony binding the uncertainty once more. The groom, or perhaps a guardian of these uncharted waters, led her away from the center of scrutiny. With each step toward the shadowy corners of that cavernous hall, more than curiosity simmered within Victoria. There was an alchemy of defiance brewing with a foundation of survival instinct. In their brief sanctuary from prying eyes, his whisper intertwined with the notes of a sweeping violin. "I know you didn't ask to be here, but here's a chance to write your story across blank pages you never knew were yours." Recognition drew a map across her doubts. Who she represented in this cobweb of intrigue was yet unclear, but the emblem this man wore on a gleaming ring, a crimson phoenix, sparked a memory of whispered tales in her childhood. Her eyes widened, a gasp escaped her lips, a sound swallowed by the symphony around them as the groom revealed with a murmur heard only by her. "In a world quite particular, you are chosen as the bride of a destiny." His words, wrapped in complexity, were as haunting as they were promising. And before she could argue or accept, a distant sound shattered the harmony, a subtle but growing clamor approaching. With a quick glance exchanged, he murmured the paused promise. "For now, remember, silence is our ally." Suddenly he pulled back, leaving Victoria with a cascade of questions poised to unfurl, dressed as shadows moving behind a curtained window. "Stay," he whispered in a voice like a forgotten sonnet. But as Victoria turned, the only thing she could hear was the echo of his footsteps disappearing into the mosaic of bright shadows. The room grew still, leaving her to ponder whether she had truly stumbled into the wrong wedding or if fate had twisted her path deliberately. And then, lingering in the gallery's glass reflection, a silhouette decidedly male waited, his face obscured by evening shadows, yet dauntingly familiar. "Where is your resolve now, Victoria?" came the unseen challenge. She inhaled sharply, her answer forming in her mind as the echoes of music and anticipation danced around her like specters on a battlefield. Gunfire reverberated through the halls like an orchestra gone awry, and Victoria's knees buckled under the weight of unforeseen danger. Shards of dissonance broke the delicate illusion of safety as the air filled with the metallic tang of fear. Victoria, with her heart galloping like a wild mare, sought refuge in the folds of a thick velvet curtain. Her fingertips traced the fibers nervously, aware of the unwelcome calm before another possible storm. Her eyes flitted across the room, scanning faces that blended with shadows, witnessing allies and foes intermingle like indistinguishable shadows in dusky twilight. Amongst the guests, she was a ghost, invisible until now. She could feel the fear coil in her gut, slithering its way up to her heart, threatening to choke her resolve. But she knew she had to act, flee, or fend off this sinister backdrop. As if tuned to the rhythm of her thoughts, the same authoritative figure who had previously addressed her materialized at her side again, his eyes both mischievous and grave. "The masquerade is falling," he murmured, each word a heavy gong in the impending silence. "And you're all tangled up in the threads." Victoria, still incensed by the duplicity around her, found her voice wrapped in defiance yet edged with despair. "I never belonged here," she countered, trying to discern the veiled motives behind the party masquerade. "Maybe," he said, more to himself than her. "Perhaps you belong more than you know, Senora." Her mind stumbled over the precipice of his suggestion, but before she could unearth its meaning, the room stirred with chaos. Guests moved like frantic shadows cast by the flicker of survival instinct. Victoria's thoughts receded to the whispered tales of her childhood, to the forgotten attic where she once stumbled upon her grandfather's diary, filled with cryptic entries about a lost legacy and empires built upon secrets. Had she been blind all this time to the world she was truly a part of? Underestimating a Russo, the man sneered as he caught the falter in her bravado. That would be their greatest folly. A dance unchoreographed, amidst chaos, offers liberation. I hope you're ready to learn the steps. But there was more at stake here than the dance between perception and perception's undoing. To survive, she had to glide through a symphony composed of whispers and veiled threats, protecting the silent wisdom of allies cloaked as enemies. Yet obstacles amassed at every juncture, doors barricaded by loyalty to the code of silence, where trust was as volatile as unsteady gunpowder. Her own resemblance to a faltering phoenix became an ironic devaluation, sacrificed amidst cold flames of skepticism and belief. Amidst her surging panic, a revelation began to crystallize like morning frost upon a russet leaf. Her instincts surged, recalling all those intricate family emblems and insignias she once idly sketched into the margins of forgotten notebooks. Suddenly, her hand brushed against the hem of her dress, a talisman she wore like armor, a delicate bracelet engraved with the same emblem that lingered in her mind, its rubies sparking defiant fire against the chilled authoritarian air. It was her scarlet signal, signaling an identity buried under layers of sophistication and secrecy, a lifeline sewn into the fabric of destiny beyond the finite strings of this precarious dance. The crescendo of danger rose palpably, a confrontation slated in cosmic textile. The husband in absentia revealed itself in discord's entrapment of stolen silences. Coping with tumult, she felt empathy's arrow carve a path through her shield, the opalescent truth glistening through as she vowed her lineage wouldn't end in ignorant betrayal. Abruptly, the labyrinthine denouement awakened the narrative within her, as betrayals became turning points, counterbalanced by revelations. She could change the narrative, rewrite the orchestral performance, and outwit these masters of elemental foe. In that moment of unwritten overture, Victoria stepped into the light a determined pen, scripting her version of events against enforced silencing. Light flooded the forgotten anecdotes she carried unguarded, in truth aligning them according to her volition. Shall we rewrite history then? Victoria dared, her confidence a harmony among dissonant chords. The question a spark igniting courage in existing veneer, a crescendo over the world's silence. Yet amidst her resolve, amidst the resplendent echo of understanding, came the shadows, extended from her peripheral as secrets that walked and watched, waiting with restrained menace. A sudden gleam against marble disclosed a distant, intangible observer. The shadow held a familiar contour, the echoing beep of a distant cry. She inhaled sharply, knowing tomorrow's epilogue would be written in the ink of unclaimed truths. "And where is your truth, Shadow?" A transparent question cast, dimly sparking the void. Then in the dim edges of grandeur came the shadow's retort, steeped in mystery, in the beating heart of an unanswered opera. And the darkness folded around her, each line an unfinished symphony. The cool edge of a blade against her skin was a promise Victoria couldn't ignore. "You have a choice," the voice was smooth, a velvet curtain over steel. "Do you run, or do you face what was always meant to be yours?" Breath hitched in her throat, cascading through the silence of her mind. Symphony of conflicting desires and buried instincts. Victoria Russo, clothed in the deceptive garb of modesty amidst opulence, had never felt so paradoxically unencumbered. The reality was stark. The world saw her as an outsider and interloper. But there was a history written in scattered whispers and hushed tones that sequenced her life into this moment. She had always been shrouded in anonymity, her legacy overlooked and underestimated, if ever acknowledged at all. Her hands bore the faint traces of small burns from restless nights spent waitressing to fund her education, yet they moved with unrecognized grace through spaces that bore witness to wealth's silent judgments. Here in this lavish enclave, she felt the weight of every dismissive glance and skeptical eye, micro details of disdain masked beneath polite veneers. As the room hummed with tension, Victoria felt the weight of scrutiny tilt on her shoulders. Her presence was a fleck of dust in an ornate tapestry woven with the strings of power and deceit. And then, that fatal inciting incident pressure took form in a ballroom dimmed with mystery, a setting both romantic and perilous. Amidst the cascade of crystal and shadows, echoes of disbelief resonated. "Who does she think she is?" murmured the throng. She couldn't answer. Not yet. Survival was a precarious dance, and the music that once played fell silent as she edged against the fringes of acceptance and rejection. The uncertainty pressed down like the sea above a helpless swimmer, a drowning gloom of peril and potential lurking beneath every gaze. More than ever, the obscured motives of those around her crystallized into a narrative veiled with hostility. She faced the tangible and intangible walls that closed in, obscuring escape routes. Yet the persistence of a key question taunted her. Who had sent for her, the hidden bride? Friend or foe? Each step further ignited a revelation, a story within a story. Her uncle spoke of empires hidden in plain sight, mapped across backstories and forgotten annexes. Her fingers lingered on a pendant in heirloom masking the sonnet of her concealed heritage. It whispered of an alliance as old as time and as intricate as interwoven lives. Through the crescendo of this orchestration, the resonance of discovery played a solitary note. She was not just a pawn, but potentially a forgotten queen in this grand match of Mafia chess. The crowd's expectations of deceit kindled like dry tinder, yielding to the blaze of her realization. The nuances of her lineage were like raindrops on a sparse desert, renewing her belief. Victoria unclasped the pendant from her neck, its weight antithetical in comfort and dread, a legacy encapsulated in a scarlet emblem of a phoenix reborn. Fate demanded she play the role, scripted and unscripted, navigating through whispers of familial influences and allegiances betrayed. Threads of ancestry and legacy wound themselves around her decisions. The climax approached a solitary area in defiance of the looming coda. Cinematic flair surrounded her, as if the walls themselves leaned closer in anticipation. She moved with unmatched resolve, her actions choreographed in the mind of every observer. Shock rippled through the room as she stepped into the light. no longer shrinking from the gaze of the masses. Who among you believed I was lost? Her voice, unwavering, commanded respect as much as attention. Each word punctuated with the limitless conviction of her bloodline and the silent saga written in her shadow. What followed was tangible respect, an unforeseen silence that spoke volumes. The architectural silence provided the podium for transformation, as if enshrining an improbable deity. There was a recalibration of sorts, a shift in the power tides all eyes on the solitary figure who transforms societal whispers into an untold crescendo. And as the newfound equilibrium settled with deceptive calm, the repose resonated with humility enveloped in the vestiges of pride. Her narrative was being rewritten with ordinary graces, filled not with arrogance, but with the understated echo of history. Yet, nestled within the gallery's subdued murmur, was a subtle betrayal in form, the shadow that promised ambiguity. "Let us see," it whispered, a harbinger of uncertainty, "if the bride dares to dance with destiny." Thus the curtain fell, a single spotlight resting with intentional ambiguity, casting the ever-present veil over Victoria. She knew shadows could summon the brilliance of light, revealing their truths eternally challenged by deceit. "I could end this right now," he whispered in a voice like crushed velvet. The blade's ghostly gleam against the pulsing veins of her neck elicited a shiver that spiraled down her spine, ensnaring her senses in a web of heightened reality and muted panic. The air was a cocktail of cologne and anxiety, a tangible thread that tightened around the room's anticipatory silence. Victoria stood at the precipice of belief and disbelief, cold marble bracing her feet beneath the suffocating grandeur that trapped her in this elaborate masquerade. The opulent chandelier above tangoed with shifting shadows, an observant eye watching as the night orchestrated its sinister waltz. Her heart was a restrained avalanche, poised at the edge of eruption, in her quiver beneath a facade honed by years of quiet endurance and unseen strength. She imagined if the world could see her now, a figure frozen amidst the opulence of danger wrapped in silk and deceit. In that moment, under radar of loaded glances, she inhaled sharply, a conscious breath, as if it might fortify her veneer with resolve. The accuser's eyes semiraled and volcanic held a challenge. "Your choice," he noted again, with a cursory tilt of the blade that suggested both an end and a beginning. Here, intention distilled into nothing more than grains of enigmatic power. Encoded within her survival was instinct, an ancient compass of ancestry. Beyond the perfumed intrigue of whispered motives, she could feel the resonance of her own bloodline pulling, a guide through mysteries she had yet to unravel. "I choose," she managed through a veil of determination, "to understand." Her voice, steady like the rhythm of seasoned rain, cast long echoes in the ears of the silent assembly. It was a vow not to be underestimated. Tension fractured like lightning across a stormy sky as his smile broadened, not with threat, but with satisfaction, as if some unspoken pact had been sealed within the fractured night. "Then let understanding wrap its wings around you," he replied cryptically, easing the knife away. Victoria barely registered the swift assassin's departure before others thronged around her, shadowy figures of scorn and whispered threat closing ranks. Unseen, the fabric of reality stitched at its seams, tight and knowing. The symphony of social expectation continued its play, yet hidden notes quivered with warning, an occlusion predicted long before the curtain ever rose. Victoria's presence under the spotlight was a dance between what remained hidden and what might yet be revealed. Surrounded by a pulsing aura of skepticism, she felt herself an interloper amidst the crescendo of expectation. Her revelation lingered beneath the surface like a buried treasure, glimpsed only when the mirror of reality glanced at just the right angle. The scars of her past became omens, the whispered pedigree of her lineage tangibly brushing against consciousness, a truth long staked in shadows beckoning for the light. "Is she Rousseau's relic?" they'd ask, eyes speculative, hunger for power masking for concern. The veneer was cracking. It was time to embrace the secrets of the past. Instead of retreat, she charged headlong into the symphony of revelations. Unspoken connections swirled through hallways dressed in ancient opulence, whispers a mere augmentation to the stories sung by marble and silk. Her senses sharpened, clarity blooming amidst riddles as her heart embraced the truth. Here, amidst this lattice of deception, she belonged. Standing beneath the starlight filtering through tall windows, she held out her family emblem, the true artistry of a forgotten saga. Gasps multiplied around her as the emblem was recognized, the gravity of its revelation a gravitational force altering perception. Victoria was no longer the outsider. She became a Russo, a whisper resistant to time. Is the blood validated by perception alone? It was a question previously unheard amidst the low rumble of the night. With steadiness, forged in fire and time, Victoria defied the shadows with the luminescence of authenticity. She wore her grandmother's bracelet like armor, the family crest, phoenix in flight, gleamed anew under the ambient glow of the ballroom. A cascade of movement erupted. What remained unsaid was as powerful as that which hung precariously in the charged air. Every gaze reaffirmed her emergence from obscurity, each acknowledged debt unfurling like a rediscovered tapestry. Your world stood still, she addressed the silent skepticism, challenging its capacity to embrace vulnerability, reborn in strength. Her voice trembled with resolve, anchoring the echoes about to disperse into the forgotten caverns of grandeur. The dynamics shifted irrevocably, secured in traditions mythic and new. It was a recalibration of spirit and silence, a moment transformed into legend among those present. Yet even breathing beneath the crystalline silence, a test lingered, brooding in shadows. Every dynasty needs its queen, he murmured once more from the recesses of flickering candlelight, his voice invisible yet inescapable. The challenge hovered, a specter among conspirators. Victoria sensed the reality monarchs existed not by secret hand alone, but by transparent, defiant presence. Her steps light, she danced the last bars of uncertain overtures, threads of withheld poetry curling around her fingers, the fate now plucked from the embrace of obscurity. And when the ballroom clock struck resonant, the illusion slipped into dusk, the final note promising more than an encore. It promised destiny. Is the story written yet, Shadow? She inquired of nothing, the room pregnant with expectation. And hidden in silhouette's loitering thread, a sinewy whisper answered softly, only if you forget how to dream. Your past catches up with you, faster than you'd ever imagine, a voice breathed from behind the tapestry, laden with the smoke of betrayal. The foreboding whisper sent a shiver down Victoria's spine. As if under spell, her gaze darted to the source, revealing only layers of dense, oppressive shadows. The grand hall, with its sapphire-studded chandeliers casting refracted light on the cold marble floors, bore witness to this unseen confrontation. Through flickering candlelight, she stood, her modest navy dress clashing against the profusion of gilded glamour that dictated the room's tone. Despite the low hum of indulgent melodies and laughter, the air carried a latent weight of unspoken alliances and long-buried vendettas. This was the setting for deals inked in blood and oaths whispered in secrecy. Yet, she felt like a forgotten character in someone else's tale, held together by whispers of nostalgia and the invisible strings of expectation. This was a clandestine world she had stumbled into. Doubts traced familiar patterns in her mind like raindrops racing down a window pane. Her rapport with such enigmatic silences wasn't unfamiliar. As a child, she would often lie awake in her sparse bedroom, listening to her father's hushed conversations through paper-thin walls. Those murmurs would weave stories in her imagination, dramatic music guiding thoughts of familial power plays, and heritage, pride-clutching unclaimed realms. The tangible concern was evident as murmured suspicions surfaced among guests. "Is the Russo's relic ready to claim what is theirs?" whispered a voice, the uncertainty resonating through circles of influential smiles, concealing predatory intent behind opportunities seized and debts yet collected. Victoria's heart drummed a nervous rhythmic orchestra of unease, fear, and the compelling urge to grasp control. Enthroned within this illustrious masquerade of exterior glamour was an understanding that every word and gesture carried consequences across generations. As she navigated further into this sphere, she had to confront the night's riddles. Was this the fate she had unknowingly been groomed for? Or was she merely a placatory piece in a power game orchestrated by histories worn like family heirlooms? Finding clarity in a world clouded by theft of innocence required guts. The air shimmered with latent energies, and as if summoned by invisible strings, a familiar presence stepped forward. The presumed groom, eyes gleaming with consequences, both certain and unforeseen. "There are more players at this chippo than you realize," he murmured. His words a delicate balance between threat and conspiracy, the scent of expensive wines weaving subtleties alongside intent. Unease infiltrated her thoughts with clawed hands. For all the distance she thought she'd placed between herself and the tangled roots of her lineage, here she stood, entwined once more within the clutch of legacy's determined claim. Navigating this intricate puzzle required diplomacy entwined with audacity. Victoria knew the compulsion to recede into obscurity was as dangerous as a misstep in a mine-laden field. Mysteries layered atop questions as shadows lengthened and people spoke in guarded tones. Entanglements between families spun anew, ancient grievances igniting under the embers of vulnerability. Her presence breathed life into those half-believed legends. As tongues disinclined to allegiance whispered, Victoria's unease crystallized into a raw surge of resolution. Removed from anonymity, every fabric of her upbringing whispered pertinent secrets. A diary she had found, hidden in the attic's chill, once suggested secrets of allegiance and ambitions harbored by ancestors. "What do you hide behind the shadows of history, Rousseau?" The idle chatter turned to imploring, unsatisfied queries directed toward her like arrows seeking their mark. There was no reluctance as she prepared to fully embrace the mantle, the fledgling heir to power unwittingly cast upon a stage of potential leads and revelations yet unfurled. Taste of destiny cut sharp against her tongue, but shock rippled through the room as a melody, a rare aria, intertwined with dust's enclosing embrace. Victoria recognized the motif, an ancient ballad entwined with her familial veins, its intonation urging action cloaked in tradition. Eyes followed the lyrics, each visitor breathing in anticipation, hands idly fingering sleek silken ghosts of secret keepsakes. As the ballad cooled into quiet hums, relevance grew tenfold beneath illusions worn to reservation. Determination clamped Victoria's voice with incoherent tones meant to signify acceptance. "Ask not for what actions came before," she declared solemnly, "but bear witness to present courage molded by those trials." Suspense rippled alongside gravity as her proclamation sank in. A phoenix reigniting myths believed lost in collateral exchanges. Stolen whispers, hidden away in trench coats, adorned with time-etched scars. With clarity, Victoria resolved to embrace the challenge of ascending to ownership of the past she never fully claimed but always felt drawn to. Gathering courage, she slipped from the crowd into corridors queued with darkened opulence. Every footstep resonated alongside audible heartbeats, echoing within corridors layered with dust-laden tapestries embroidered in stories untold. Amidst these passageways loomed figures rendered vague by mirage and memory. As recognition gleamed the recital in vibrant strata upon fear receding quietly into perspectives uncharted, a single artifact caught her eye, a dagger gleaming among relics stored within glass enclosures, emblazoned with her family's phoenix brand. An undeniable emblem entangled within time's tightest web, radiating influence through ivory silhouettes pulled softly onto bedecked halls with grown potential. She hesitated, letting the iconic emblem speak volumes. Its legacy waited within such a piece. This ancient mark was her birthright, her shield against inconspicuous predators lurking behind opulent facades, a relic of whispered promises. With newfound resolve, Victoria extracted the dagger from its display, its presence commanding respect amidst whispers of awe among observers urged to skepticism. Armed by narrative's own tangible decree, she stepped into a light. "A rare find," an older gentleman observed softly, appraising curiosity converging with hardened wisdom, beneath brows threaded with years past and tales paradoxically periphery. The knife's weight balanced destiny and caution as arrangements shifted anew toward her poised presence, edge imbued with expectancy, kissed by moonlit secrets, unrequited. Feeling the solidity of the grip echoed comfort wrapped around its ancient design, Victoria felt her heart, a steady, concordant beat, with the silence embracing her decision. Dominion over chaos, whispers unvoiced, yet avowed that history could bind friends or foe. Illumination found's purpose lit her path toward identity enfleshed. And still, round recurrence, a shadow lingered. "O russet phoenix," echoed subtle chimes of destiny, "what legacy do you awaken now?" The smell of cigar smoke mixed with the floral scent of roses, creating an intoxicating aroma under the heavy chandelier lights. A whispered promise cut through the haze. "Do you know they say the only way out of a nightmare is through the gate of death? Or the grace of a hidden ally?" Victoria Russo stood still, feeling the weight of expectation as she pivoted in her simple yet incongruous attire, a lone figure against a background of gold and opulence. Her reflection blinked back at her on the polished floor, a mosaic of possibilities spinning chaotically. The room loomed larger than life, mirroring a disorienting funhouse where illusion masqueraded as reality. The whispers of her mysterious heritage hung around her like a stubborn cloak she could neither shed nor alter. As cocktail glasses clinked and laughter echoed, doubt gnawed at the edges of her composure. How easily friends disguise themselves as strangers here, veiled in mock sincerity. She scanned the crowd, observing eyes that searched for her vulnerabilities, each one an echo of either disdain or rivalry. The room pulsed with an undercurrent of power plays and tightly bound secrets, and she, Victoria Russo, was the outsider tasked with unraveling these enigmatic threads. Her heart thudded softly in her chest, a quiet metronome beneath the louder symphony of burgeoning turmoil. Her grandfather had always said that the most dangerous choice is the one born out of ignorance. Not knowing where she truly stood amidst this melee was the greatest peril. Still acting like we've got secrets to hide? A voice, low and serpentine, teased from the shadows nearby. It shocked her more an accusation than an inquiry. She met the gaze, eyes like two shards of cracked glass glinting under the subdued light. With a measured breath and a flicker of defiant resolution, Victoria mustered every fiber of courage to sift through the dark backdrop, appealing to the enigma each face presented. "I'm ready for the truth, not the stories crafted by convenience," she replied, armor in her voice. But her growing resolve quickly faced palpable resistance. A peripheral figure, one whose allegiances were woven in treachery and honor alike, stepped into the weakening light, further distorting the boundary of ally from adversary. In the shadows, reality took on a dangerous malleability. The night's deluge of tests gathered momentum. She was confronted not only by the inscrutable, but by loyalty's treacherous sibling, deceit. The world strained to remember the long-forgotten Russo narrative, but she felt an unavoidable pressure on her shoulders, a tempest desperately needing calm. Her uncle's worn diary clung to her palm, its pages teeming with echoes of a past she was always meant to inherit. Behind its worn leather facade, hidden alliances and ancient blood rights beckoned her to follow an untold path. Each interaction layered intricacy upon this fraught tapestry as guests oozed charm with the slippery texture of oil. "You playing the game yet, Victoria? Or were you never shown the rules?" Another sly voice attempted to unsettle her, but she only acknowledged with a resolute silence. Inexplicably, familiarity tightened its grip around her heart, whisper from her past, urging confidence. Her mother's rose-infused perfume, memory still vivid, an inviolable power she carried like a secret weapon. The specter of her grandmother's elegance, challenging norms with quiet strength, danced before her eyes. These memories of strength were the undercurrents that held her steady. And then, a revelation crystallized as she traced the embossed phoenix on her bracelet, its crimson hue catching the ambient glow. She was not merely surviving, she was emerging. Here she stood, refuting the notion of an accidental Bridea placard of her ancestors' resilience. Her choice to stand firm echoed through the breaths they took, shifted allegiances, and dismissed those of shadowy intent. Unexpected, a ripple coursed through the room as recognition bloomed. That emblem, underappreciated and unseen for generations, shone now like a beacon guiding her home. Victoria Russo, an unwilling daughter of legacy, defied history's restraint. Let them think they had you figured out, yet never see the true endgame, a voice, rich and paternal, muse close by, notorious hand extended, offering more questions than clarity. Rising to her grandiloquent task, Victoria exhaled decades of dictated lineage. She encapsulated the unity of past and present, knowing her foundation was set in stone unturned. As orchestrated crescendos of disbelief wavered into sharp melody, Victoria took center stage not as a pawn, but as the architect of rebirth. Amidst the thrumming heartbeat of the ballroom, the scene unfolded as a revelation with every exchanged glance, each step a liturgical promise suspended between tradition and change. With friends and foes bemused, incendiary alliances flickered into view. Encouraged by the dawning reality, she rallied against the night's false closes. Yet, amidst the chaos of power reclaimed, a shadow lingered at the edge of her vision, a fleeting, haunting specter. It whispered a single cryptic refrain that only she could hear, freezing her heart. "The greatest betrayal comes not from a distant stranger," it whispered, leaving in its wake a chilling breath, "but from one you truly trust." The heavy doors lurched open, flooding the room with blinding light. "Seems the bride's become the spectacle," Victoria heard the sardonic voice slice through the murmur of gasps. The brilliance stung her eyes, momentarily blurring the room into a halo of gilded colors. As her vision cleared, she saw faces turn toward her, their features sharp with intrigue and incredulity. The air simmered with disbelief, manifesting as a physical force. Her breathing steadied as she confronted the hostile yet curious crowd, each one a potential enemy, cloaked in tailored suits and dazzling jewels. Somewhere amidst this opulent chaos lay the answer to her predicament, an ensemble of ancient secrets demanding revelation. A subtle aura of connection shimmered between her and the gathered assembly like a trembling spider's thread. Victoria knew she was an outsider here, her modest silhouette framed by the splendor of wealth, inflicted architecture, a canvas of power and history. The days of waitressing and modest living seemed a world away, as scrutiny pressed down like a tidal wave of expectation. Millennia-old chandeliers reflected off polished gold trims, their opulence mocking the simplicity of her navy blue dress. Her fingers gently grazed the phoenix pendant resting on her chest, secret badge of heritage and resilience. Tension spiked as her challengers sensed vulnerability. "Why resurrect ghosts better left forgotten?" someone questioned, their voice strung with accusation. Victoria's heart skipped, a symphony of newfound purpose. Each shadowy corner held a mirror reflecting her own determination back at her. Time seemed to freeze, the world allowing a breath before the tempest. But she could not falter. Her grandmother's stories, once bedtime tales, now formed the robust spine of her resolve. The power of bloodlines coursed through her veins, vow-bound to claim the rightful place destiny carved for her. Crisis enveloped her like a summer storm, each raindrop a reminder of past burdens mingled with present trials. The ballroom swirled with whispers, Victoria at the nexus of destiny's tempest. She could feel the foundation trembling under the weight of history's untold. The antagonist revealed himself within the shifting mass, eyes sharp as cut glass. Confidence bloomed in the antagonist, feeding off the crowd's dubious energy. "Russo's lost child returns," he mocked, stepping closer into the light, his aura as charismatic as lethal. Her pulse surged as these worded darts struck, buzzing with the gravity of unspoken certainties. Internally, a dialogue thundered, could courage quell the rise of doubt infesting her? Then came the junction of revelation. Her hands, once traced by dish soap and worry, now gripped legacy's shield. The ancient dagger gleamed in anticipation, its phoenix emblem echoing a promise as old as her lineage. In one smooth gesture, Victoria held the blade aloft, its surface catching the room's luminance. Surprised gasps swirled around her. "This is who I am," her voice, clear and defiant, wove through the tense silence, gathering strength. Slowly, all captivated their scrutiny, tensions unwinding into hushed admiration. The true weight of her lineage bore into the crowd's collective psyche, the recognition seeping into their bones. The Russo legacy stood tall once again, embodied in her presence. Gripped by control, the audience pieced her image together anew. Not a powerless intruder, but a formidable phoenix risen from obscurity's ashes. The musical crescendo, unseen hands on keys striking harmony, signaled this paradigm shift. She felt the rhythm reverberate through her, notes composed by fate itself. The arch of time swayed perspectives, a magnetic pull drawing them closer to acceptance. Victoria acknowledged the subdued gravitas, her acceptance seeming imperceptibly intensified. But respite was an illusion. In the air, heavy with realization, a revelation's ember yet smoldered. The audience, reclaimed of its breath, observed this unfurling tale as though a grand opera waxed lyrical, each dramatic stroke unveiling continuity. Victoria gazed beyond, seeing the future and past woven in intricate patterns, but the sensation of humiliation no longer burdened her steps. With quiet humility, she bade farewell to the fiction of vulnerability. It was no longer her script to bear. The doors of inevitability creaked open. Resolution's hymn softened the hall. Yet her soul sensed the ultimatum. The night wasn't void of treachery, still shrouded, waiting beneath blackened cloaks. "Where's your loyalty when tested by flame?" a whisper cooed, edging the brink of consciousness. And so the narrative swelled anew, demanding its due several acts hence. Victoria Russo's reflection, warped in the faceted glass of the ballroom doors, seemed to mock her. This was her reality, a world filled with privilege and peril. The familiar phantom of doubt loitered at her shoulder, a reminder of how far she had to fall. Yet another presence lingered, too ghostly yet persistent, like a maternal whisper in the ear. Her dress, a deep shade of midnight, glistened under the chandeliers, contrasting with the crystallized elegance of everyone around her. They were polished pearls swirled in currents of wealth she never swam in, yet she navigated through them with the fluidity of someone who had floated through less lustered seas. How often had she wished silently for moments like these, where her every choice seemed amplified by the expectations of generations before her. As hushed conversations swelled around her like a symphony of secrets, the world seemed to pause when a challenge echoed through the room. "Fight or flee, what's your choice, little bird?" A voice curled around her spine, cold as a winter breeze, slicing through the sonorous melodies. For a moment, the vision of herself as the small-town girl, tucked safely away from a danger's grasp, flickered. But this wasn't her fantasy. It was the fierce light of ambition in her eyes that answered her, an ancestral flame refusing to be extinguished. Here she was, at the heart of case, and she felt its rhythm pulse in her veins. Movement caught the corner of her eye. Figure, cloaked in shadows, entered the periphery of her vision. Fear snaked its way up her spine, a visceral reminder of the stakes. Each step from the intruder resonated across the tension-wrought hall, the anticipation palpable. The room inhaled as the figure stopped under the dim halo encircling the dance floor, spaces glowing with malice barely concealed beneath polite facades. It was an execution grounds, plunged into the chill of anticipatory violence. As the familiar antagonista, man whose smile was a mere mask for the serpentine cunning within, stepping forward, his gaze met hers with a sinister promise. Victoria held his stare, refusing to acknowledge the vulnerability that gnawed at the edges of her control. "Little bird," he taunted again, his tone dripping with shred vehemence. "Do you know who you dance with?" Her fingers brushed the pendant at her throat, a phoenix, wings spread in defiant flight, the emblem a silent reminder of resilience and resurrection. "I know this," she replied, her voice steady amid the storm. "I am not afraid to fly." The crowd's murmur swelled in response, a tide slashed with skepticism. The wave of judgment crashed against her, and she could taste the scent of betrayal, mingled with the heady aroma of cigars and expensive perfumes filling the air. From the depths of the ballroom came antagonizing challenges layered in laughter, a thinly veiled attempt to overthrow her nascent authority. Every step she took towards the center marked a cross in the sandaline, defiant against the pressure surrounding her. Gazes followed, whispers trailing, suspicion like a cloak. What secrets echo here? Her words cut through the smoky tension, hanging between them, a challenge and an invitation embroidered with daring. "Secrets that you may never survive knowing," her challenger sneered. Every consonant a sharpened blade. But Victoria felt the tingle of old stories surge anew within her, spirit tales that had been her lullaby, the stories of family power unbroken. Unwavering, she summoned the melodies of past triumphs that played on repeat within her. No longer a disoriented guest at a party, but a determined warrior prepared to fight her forgotten battles. Against the mocking laughter, the shadows thickened, curling like the tendrils of a malevolent storm around her. The room seemed to breathe with a life of its own, the very air imbued with ancient suspense. "Let the phoenix rise," she declared, more to the gathered than her adversary. Her courage stretched across the divide, a bridge suspended on gossamer threads of shared stories. And as those words lingered, an unexpected hush swept the halls. Looks intertwined with wonderment, as if they watched a legend weave itself into existence. Yet, amidst the resettled quiet, a revelation unfurled, a figure from the recesses of her memory, born anew an ally, perhaps, or a hidden enemy still cloaked in familial legacy. Their presence shifted the atmosphere, plucked at the fixings of fate like threads of a worn tapestry. Her thoughts whirled with possibilities, each tug at her consciousness a note on a crescendo of destiny. The night's tempo intensified, every heartbeat a drum roll of electrified possibilities that snapped against her skin. Her past, swept into dark corners by fearful hands, had crept into this present momentum, unveiled as truths to be faced. Just as she reacquainted her footing, widened the chasm of speculation in her wake, another voice emerged, calm accent underlined with urgency. "There are wolves in this den. Decide if you will be one too." The echo reawakened buried instincts, tugging her senses into the fray. Her understanding set the stage as she clutched at the symbolic dagger. She became the architect of her uprising, reclaiming narrative threads that teetered on the brink of oblivion. Where margins veiled darkness, now they heralded the dawn. The approaching storm beckoned with outstretched claws. Underneath the sparkling fallacies of grandeur, shadows marinated in patience. And then, just as she willed herself forward into the battlefield of legacies, a pained cry erupted, a gut-wrenching sound resonating through the rafters, piercing the ethereal veil. Victoria's resolve never wavered, but that solitary echo whispered terror. And the jackal waited in the shadows, waiting to rip her newfound strength asunder. The world tensed, and the air crackled, suspenseful chord that shattered against the silence. Before the night could unfold further, a stark line closed around her thoughts, unspooling like the reckless theater of whispered fears. Singular challenge whispered from the shadows. "How bold are you when history repeats?" Victoria's world fell silent as the piercing, blood-curdling cry echoed through the grand hall, instantly suffocating the whispers and murmur of intrigue. The very air seemed to shudder with the sheer intensity of its despair, rippling through the lavish chamber and sending the glittering chandeliers overhead into a tremulous sway. This feral outpouring of anguish that slashed the carefully stitched fabric of decorum and threat, revealing the raw, underlying chaos, right on the cusp of swallowing her whole. She had been poised to confront the storm, eyes resolute and dagger in hand. But now the echo of that cry held her rooted, its origin invisible amidst the shadows, yet painfully near. Sweat gathered along her brow, a spectral reminder of the dread coursing through her veins. Beyond the glow of candlelight, she perceived stirrings, a ripple of alarm carried through the assembly of predatory dignitaries. Victoria, the simple girl from a forgotten corner of obscurity, now embodied a past veined with unfathomable power and expectation. Beneath her feet, the floor glistened with the sheen of polished conviction. The portraits of her ancestors hanging upon the wall seemed to eye her with ancestral appraisal. As she stood, a wave of icy panic spread, enveloping her reality. Fleeing felt impossible, a betrayal of courage, and so too standing, where the very air quivered with the promise of violence at every movement. Her heart, acting in concert with the silent symphony of expectation, thudded in her chest like a distant drum calling through misted memories. The antagonistic figure that once served as her tormentor now hung back within the nebulous crowd. His eyes sparkled with malicious curiosity, his lips a thin line of contempt pierced by the tantalizing bite of this new drama. Something more ancient than their modern game simmered behind his gaze, and she could feel it burning through the space between them, rebellion against the stark vulnerability suddenly revealed. The assembly, a sea of glittering judgment, seemed to ferret out the firmer grip she was exerting over this faltering masquerade. But a further surprise threatened their tiny confidences in this age-old charade, unwinding control like a thread loosening under gentle, inevitable pressure. From the depths came a presence so suddenly clear, it was as if the very shadows whispered. There, amidst the gilded hall, emerged a figure, a bearer of secrets, clad in worn elegance. Her appearance, draped in mystery, caused a collective rupture in the gathered decorum. With her entrance, a shiver of recognition traveled from eye to knowing eye, painting an unspoken narrative across the assembly. Her voice, timeless and hauntingly familiar, delivered only one poignant line, a cipher meant solely for Victoria's ears. A phoenix knows its fire, even in the dark. That singular remark shattered the remains of Victoria's indecision. The precision of its meaning resonated like a bell struck true at midnight. It spoke not only of her right, but of her intrinsic strength buried beneath years of unremembered legend. In an instant, she stepped forward, letting her breath merge with the cadence carved by destiny's unwavering hand. The thick velvet of doubt and authority draped across her shoulders sparkled with newfound understanding. In confronting the gathering's depthless hush, she confronted herself, legacy hidden and a lineage recognized. Eyes that had temporarily closed to her potential otherness began to perceive a shift. Their reassessment was a gradual unraveling of labels, as their scrutiny unveiled possibility beyond their base assumptions. Victoria's voice, calm yet unwavering, like winter's crystal whisper, pierced through the hum of disbelief. We cannot stare into the darkness without becoming the light that guides. I am that light tonight, illuminating the truths forgotten and restoring what shadows have kept from sight. Faces around her faced this proclamation with varying hues of awe and skepticism, some clutched tightly by resistance. Yet Victoria knew well enough now the fortress of her resolve. She represented not only herself, but what her bloodline demanded of Hera Beacon, forged through secrecy and history reclaimed. Then, as easily as a page turning in a forgotten storybook, the figure of a woman radiantly timeless and ruthless nodded in acknowledgement from where she stood, straddling the present in a past thick with resonance. Victoria at last recognized Hera, former friend of her family, perhaps a guardian angel of sorts, come to steer her in this strange detour of fate. Her appearance was enough. The whispers around them crescendoed into a symphony of resolution, each note charging with overwhelming power of discovery. Even in admitting this ceaseless flux, the urgency of truth kept itself anchored at the heart. Gilded truths fell aside like leaves caught in an autumn's dance as silence planted its seeds in acceptance. The revelation rested not only a crown upon Victoria's brow, but also cast a pebble into rippling waters, urging forward a gathering momentum. It was time of denouement, as contours stretching as the story invoked by sight and sound. Just as Victoria grasped her fate, felt its weight transform from fear into reasoned strength, a sudden gust of understanding swept the room, silencing even the echoes of their whispered history. All at once, the clarity she had sought came into focus, her eyes locked with the spectral guardian, who nodded with infinite understanding. It was a cosmic agreement passed beyond speech, a shared knowledge bound by heavier yokes and lighter whispers. In that confluence of sight and sound, realization and resistance unspooled into relief, Victoria Russo found her voice rising above the crowd, shepherded by a hidden tenacity. Her heart, filled with the embers of a forgotten dynasty, roared into its breathiest chorus. Yet, before the room breathed its recognition, allowing dawn's fingers to curl through its high windows, Victoria felt once again the shadow of doubt, that potentially ruinous thing, slip around her heart. Amidst the echoes of affirmation, a new shadow slunk through the crowd, leaving a dark question in its wake. What does it mean to become everything you feared? That was the puzzle left for her to unravel in the emergence of night's quiet promise. The room trembled with an almost palpable silence, each ceramic vase and velveteen drape holding its breath. Victoria stood in the middle, her fingers wrapped cautiously around the dagger that had illuminated her familial past. It was oddly comforting, its weight an anchor amidst the swirling chaos of unyielding expectation. Faces that moments ago bore scrutiny and veiled contempt now stared with guarded curiosity. The pendulum of judgment swung. There was a shift, slight yet undeniable. But in the midpoint of her newfound authority lay the potential for disaster. The storm lingering at her thoughts' periphery, threatening to complicate the silk threads she deftly wove into her fractured tapestry of control. Her opponent's eyes lingered, coquettish curiosity mingling with reluctant respect. That ancient sort of reverence the world whispered about when stories of fate and determination were spun by the crackling warmth of legacy's fire. Yet in that moment, each breath was a pact with history, each exhalation a promise of untapped potential. The opulent hall seemed to sigh in its suspended grandeur, a grand canvas stretched taut with tales of ambition. Crystal chandeliers poured cool moonlight onto the polished floors where fate had choreographed this dance of lineages bound and broken. Her silhouette, cut against the backdrop of unfolding destiny, was modest yet resolute, recalling countless whispers from childhood. Chased by shadows of obscurity, she circled her anxiety in perfect strides, traces of humility carved between marble romances portraying heroes long forgotten. With her heartbeat attuned to the hum of shifting allegiances, Victoria watched a potential adversary step forward. Silence held promise just as much as threat. The night, once an enigma draped in unfathomable indifference, now shimmered with the potential of palindrome tribulations. "Russo, are you prepared to live in the shadow of these choices?" boomed a voice, regal yet sharp. Her response was immediate, a spark ignited from heritage's furnace. The shadow of choices pales against the dawn of conviction. I am Russo, and dawn is mine. Her voice bore a confident resonance, a melody shaped by the thunderous applause of self-realization. The space between her and the crowd blurred, falling away like ash from a firebird's wings. No longer the distance between them, a mere byproduct of derisive assumption. Now came the story's true test and interruption, echoed from the chamber's edges, curdling the golden promise of equilibrium. Figures clad in tradition's armor stepped forward, their suits starched in secrets, their eyes blunt weapons veiled with implausible alliances. When blood seeks its own marrow, do you bleed strength or expectation, Victoria Russo? An enigma wrapped in authority prodded, stepping into the circle of shimmering light. Another fragment of her past flickered to life, resurfacing like a long-forgotten lullaby. Her fingers closed around the pendant, its cool curvature awakening a rush of stories, personal and profound. With it, she felt Mother's unwavering hand across the tide of ages. I bleed courage, Victoria declared with a quiet power, each word resonating through the wrinkling fabric of present turmoil. Her heart was a conduit for evolution, a silent conspiracy against doubt's seduction. Harmony unfolded in waves reluctant, yet yielding, and the tension that grappled among hearts released its dire grip, a cascade of acceptance, thriving beneath conscious debate. The confrontation leaped forward, time stretched taut, each second becoming a bead of crystallized fate. At this unexpected precipice, Victoria's personal crossroad transformed from a pitch-black echo to a burst of refracted clarity, illuminating the intricacy of webs unseen. Her lineage bore the crimson pulse of Phoenix re-emerged from embers, ash whispered into familiar kindling. Laughter arced through the ballroom, sound enchanting in its sardonic curtain call. With boldness etched in every step, she seized her mantle, no longer a tethered soul adrift, but a beacon sailing into the resurgence of day. Yet even as calm brushed against fears, an undercurrent remained, unrelenting, never sated. In that poignant tableau, a hum rattled through the ranks of disbelief, a forced fugue resting upon shoulders cast aside by forgotten narratives. They watched, a spellbinding continuation woven within the postscript of confrontation, awaiting the dawn, woven with her name. As shadows wove around truths and untruths, the distant clock announced midnight, a resonance shrouded with spectral expectancy. The ones who had come demanded consequence, yet the course was clear. Victoria Russo, with the dagger alight in heritage's sworn fire, poised not as relic, but revelation. And with narrowed eyes she beckoned the forward march of destiny, born not from gilded trinkets, but whispers ancestor breathed amongst vigor. Her time was now, but inside the resplendent stillness, looming beneath acknowledgement wrapped in starlit glory, remained a voice of cryptic counsel. Have you considered what deep roots may uncover in alliance with newfound wings? The shadows teased, carrying the tale into tomorrow's slumber.